Okay, so my name is VJ. I am almost social worker still, but I have a question because I think I'm, no offense to the panel and also the organizers, but I maybe just am a little bit disappointed that the scope of caregiving here is only talking about children, because I think for many women, caregiving doesn't only mean children, and maybe for many women, the hallmark of being a woman is not just motherhood, but they may forego being a wife and a mother because of caregiving. And you may be an empowered woman now telling yourself that, yes, I'm going to make this choice for myself to take care of my elderly parents, my elderly grandparents. But then as you grow older, what happens to you? Because you yourself will become that your empowered 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old woman that you are now will become the single vulnerable old woman later as well. And the government is going to make you pay more for CareShield anyway. And I think that inequality has to be seen in that frame as well, because it cuts across classes is one thing, but also through culture as well. It is generationally perpetuated that this caregiving role is still passed down to daughters. And many of these daughters do not choose to become wife and mothers because they are still taking care of their own mothers and grandmothers. So maybe there's something that we need to consider, that caregiving is not just taking care of children, because many people would love to have children, but maybe they are just foregoing that. And then what happened to these women? Because do we just pass them off to the elderly sector when they grow old? Because that's no longer a women's issue, it's an elderly issue. So maybe that's something to consider. Yeah.
Thanks for raising that. That, in fact, is our next piece of research. So we are currently, and we have started this, right? We are looking at the financial situation of caregivers, especially in that 45 to 65. We've actually asked for people to volunteer, tell us their stories. We are very, very concerned about the financial well-being, especially of these caregivers. So next forum will probably, I don't know, maybe a year down, that's what we'll be dealing with.
We are also involved in some research that focuses more on older persons. I think you raised a very important point, because the specific content of the caregiving of children and the caregiving of older persons is very different, right? And the kind of emotional and psychological challenges, I think, vary quite a lot, and it does, I think, take specific attention and shouldn't be lumped together. I think that there are some important similarities in terms of paying attention to what are the gender inequalities and what are the socioeconomic inequalities and how they play out. And I think that the vulnerabilities that groups, that on one hand is because people, so on one hand, we know that women more than men do caregiving labor, yeah, and that has consequences for long-term economic, financial well-being and the meeting of needs. And we know that persons with lower income, of course, will also have suffer in some ways greater consequences, yeah, for doing work that takes them out of the formal employment sector. Yeah. This goes back a little bit to one of the points I was trying to make earlier about the importance, therefore, of not being fixated on employment as the thing that gives people worth, as the thing that makes people deserving of public resources. Because I think as long as we do that, we won't be able to fully value the important labor that people do, and that some of this labor will probably always stay unpaid in some ways, yeah? But the fact that people are not paid for that labor should not mean that later on they're not able to meet their healthcare needs, meet their needs for housing, meet their needs for having savings, and meet their needs for needing to retire, meet their needs for, all kinds of basic needs that people have.
Thank you. I take the next question, please.
Thank you. I'm Kanwal Soin, one of the founder members of AWARE, and I'm very happy to be here. I want to make one or two quick, not necessarily related points. One is on care. You see, care is relational, and care cannot be commodified. And this lack of commodification is what makes it so hard to evaluate, but yet it undergrades the whole of society. So all of us, policymakers, everyone else of us, has to think of what care means to society and how do we repay the care. The second point I wanted to make was, and I think it's from Carrie, of course, parents want the best for children, and yet we are only given that choice for preschool. How come when it comes to primary school and secondary school, we can't send our children to private schools anymore? Then it becomes a national curriculum that we have to follow. So if we believe in meritocracy, why does it only start from primary 1 and not much earlier? And another quick, just a small point to what you said, Corina. You are interviewing people up to age of 65. There are older people after 65 who also give care. So please don't stop at 65. Because all the statistics in government, everything stops at 65. There are many of us who are alive after 65. No, and this was in relation to care. My mum, I'm 76, and I looked after my mum until last year, that is 75, and she passed away when she was 97. So life starts before you're born, and it does not stop at 65.
The reason why 65 is because we're looking at what financial costs they have given up, right? So it was about the working age. So, but of course, yeah, well, yeah.
Then you should also lower down the benchmark below because it should be way like 25 onwards. Yeah, not 45.
Okay, I'll tell my research director.
Yeah, next question.
Yeah. Okay. Just like to reflect on certain things being shared and to challenge the belief, because I'm seeing a lot of young people here and I'm seeing a mother sharing her belief system. Okay, imagine if we all want cheap subsidies. Are you willing to work in a low-pay job, young people? Even the mothers themselves don't want to compromise their salary to work in such low-paid job, but yet they demand the quality of an independent school. I'm not saying that our NTUC childcare cannot afford, but if we ourselves are not prepared to come down to that standard and work at that level, and we're expecting others to give our children that level, who's going to fill in the role? And also, what is wrong with eating rice and egg and ketchup? I grew up in a family that is just, you get plain rice and soy sauce, it's a blessing. I don't know what kind of values we are imparting to our young children now, that I must have McDonald's, I must have iPad, I must go to some holidays. Are we preparing them for failure? Because all these things are hard work. You don't start work and start having all these things. You realize that your salary with all these things goes within less than 1 week. So it brings back what kind of belief system that we are teaching our young people and our children. Must it always be a 4-room flat that is beyond our payment? I grew up in a 1-room flat with 7 people living in it and we are still fine. So it's something for us to reflect. Are we killing our own human race with our own expectation of the comfortability of lifestyle? It's not so much about women helping inequality. I think it is our own belief that what we want, no? And by doing it, saying it, I really feel I'm an educator. I look at the young people now, I tell you, I feel very sad. Resilience and grit is not a concept that we heard in our era. But now everybody is talking about, we need to teach our kids resilience, we teach. Why?
Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
for sharing. I think one thing that strikes me when hearing that is, of course, times change, right? So 20 years ago, maybe about a third of the public housing stock was rental housing. And then if you go back 40 years, it was more than half. So norms shift, right? So that's the first thing. But I wonder if panelists have any thoughts about that.
I think the first point, I think the first point you raise is about childcare workers. Is that the point you're raising? Yeah, and I think that that's an important point to pay attention to the fact that when we think about increased numbers of paid workers in some of these sectors, that we make sure we do not also increase the number of exploited workers in these paid sectors. I don't know if that was where you were going with that, but I think that is an important point to pay attention to, that many of the people populating jobs in the care sector are people who are themselves poorly paid for the work that they do. Yeah? And this often has to do with two things. One is gender. One is that we know that whenever a certain occupation becomes predominantly occupied by women, that sector's salary gets suppressed. Yeah? We also know that to the extent that people think about care labor as not real work, that also tends to get undervalued. So the undervaluing of care labor is a very important thing to pay attention to, so that when we ask for the expansion of these sectors, we must also, of course, pay attention to the fact that these are also workers who should be protected. These are also workers who themselves have other responsibilities and burdens they need to care for. I think that that's absolutely true. On the issue of how to think about what are needs, I think that is a very important question on the table now, which we should continue to talk about. Yeah? What are needs, and is it possible as a society to figure out what are basic needs and what are decent standards of living? And I think it is, and I think that it is contextual, meaning that, you know, what most of us would accept as normal and as nothing to really think about, yeah, 30 years ago or 20 years ago, however long ago we would like to pitch it in our imaginations, yeah, that is different than now. So we all, for example, have mobile phones, yeah, and I think most of us grew up before a time when mobile phones were a thing, right? And mobile phones were certainly not a need for any of us until in relative recent history. But now I think if I ask you, is mobile phone a need? Everybody would say yes, yeah? Why is that? Because we need it to communicate with other people. We need it to know where we are going, yeah? Because nobody prints maps anymore. And actually, I wouldn't know how to read one. And we need it because we need to belong to society, right? If this is the way our friends are communicating with each other, and we don't have a mobile phone, then essentially we can't continue to build these relationships and have these friendships with other people. So I think the concept of needs and how we think about needs is a thing that is evolving, constantly evolving, yeah? And part of what I think everyone needs is just this sense that we belong. We are able to keep up with society. We are able to keep up with our friends. I think that most people are not thinking in terms of, I have to one-up my friends. And most kids, when they're thinking about what they want, they're not thinking about wanting to be better than their friends. They're thinking about how to be the same as their friends. Kids don't like to be picked out and special, you know. They like to have the thing their friends have. Yeah. Thank you for your questions.
I think we're talking about inequality, and we have to look at, so how I think about it is just how do you participate in society, right? And if we are going to stop this inequality gap from growing, we actually do need to not just look at absolute poverty, is there enough food, but we really, like Luan says, we have to look at how people can continue to participate. So the woman who got lost because she didn't have a GPS, you know, it's harder for her to participate and to get that job. if she doesn't have that mobile phone, right? So I think it is relative.
Okay, I want to say something to this, just to give you the kopi and the Milo big analogy. So, I'm all for grit and resilience in children. My dad would say when he was growing up, or even when I was growing up, and we had this amount of pocket money, and we went to school, and the kids, if I couldn't afford that kind of Coke in school during recess time, it was okay, because most of my friends couldn't afford either. It was a common thing. I didn't feel like I was worse off or I was different. But now my nieces go to school, and we're having kids drinking that fancy whipped cream, multicolored unicorn freaking frappuccino from Starbucks. and other kids can't afford even Milo Peng from their own school canteen. I'm not saying that we should teach our kids to all want to drink that weird unicorn drink and put it on Instagram, because it's just too expensive and it's frivolous, right, for a primary school kid to buy. But I'm saying, can we do away with all that and help every kid to at least feel like they can afford, and it's normal that I can buy Milo Peng from school. And I think that's the crux of the matter.
Hi. I just wanted to address what you said just now about eating the rice and egg and that soy sauce. I grew up with that. I'm teaching my child that it's okay to eat it. But from a mother's point of view, I would want to give my child more. What I can afford. McDonald's, my children don't go to McDonald's often. One is, I think, it's not that great. we make hamburgers at home. But the point is, I'm teaching my child that you don't have to go eat McDonald's every week. We can do it at home as a family. And also that, we are very blessed to have food on the table. It's just that from a mom's point of view, I really want to give my children more. This one likes to eat nasi kicap and eggs at home. And also another thing is, before I had children, I was a teacher. I worked in an international school. I was earning above 2,000. And then I got married and I got kids. I understand where you're coming from, where the low wages, people who take care of the children, low wage, whether we are willing to go down. I mean, it's not only childcare. Teachers in primary school, in secondary school, they are underappreciated. I was a secondary school teacher. Why are we underappreciated? We look after children from young all the way. I have my students coming back to me and saying, Miss, I just gave birth to my second child. They remember us as teachers. Why are we underappreciated? I think it's not only teachers. Cleaners are underappreciated. It's not saying low wage job is not great. It's the appreciation that they do it. That's all.
Yes. I'm a clinical psychologist and I don't live here, so what I'm going to tell you is just some of my observations. I went into Popular Bookstore a few days ago and I almost had a panic attack. I have never seen so many assessment books. So when I think Miss Carrie Tan talked about where are we moving with this? So based on what my students teach me, I work in a community college. We think that education is about finding a job and getting an occupation. And what we forget is that it also will free us from fear. So I give you the example of a student I have. He has a 3.0 GPA. He worked very, very hard, come from a very impoverished and disenfranchised family. He was accepted into 3 UC schools, and he couldn't take them. Because he said, if I were to pick any one of those, I will leave my family behind. So there is, within education itself, right, there's a dread that the kids have about succeeding and not succeeding, and then about leaving their family behind. So the conversation has to be not just about making more money, moving on, but also about what is it about my family where the values itself is so precious that it doesn't matter where I go and how I move, that they will be with me. So I guess what I'm trying to say is our emphasis on education and education as an upward mobility, maybe out of poverty, also has to include a conversation about values and how we value each other. Because I may be poor, but there are values about me that are enduring, like Siti, right? How she thought about her kids, the life that, the decisions she has to make in order to take care of them. Why would that change? And how come we as a society, we don't see that? We only look at how much a person earns or how many degrees they have. So that's just my observation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, can I take one more last question and then have the panelists respond to those together? Oh, I saw that hand shot. Oh, there are so many now. Okay, I'm sorry, I will only be able to take one last one, and then of course the panelists will be around later on. You can come out and have a chat. But on the aisle at that side, there was a. That one. I'm sorry to. Oh, I didn't see that you already. So maybe since you're already holding it, so both of you then. But no more after that.
Thank you so much. So sorry about this. You can go first. It's fine. Thank you. Okay. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Valencia. I'm just a young person who is concerned about equality and who has gone through some things myself. So these are very close to my heart. And I think it's very interesting that we've reached a point in this Q&A where we're talking about values. Both as individuals and as societies, and we're talking about narratives that we have to change. And it is my concern as a person because I come to these talks and I'm interested in these conversations, you know. But my concern is how do I bring these topics out of these four walls? How do I continue these conversations with people, you know, with the larger Singaporeans, with my parents who I can say, oh, did you hear about this book? Then they're like, oh, okay, Lord, you know, I don't really care. Like, how does it concern me? Yeah, and so how do we continue these conversations? How do I explain these complex, nuanced issues to the layperson who have no experiences, who will not understand, unlike, you know, for example, Miss Carrie, who was in the private sector and didn't understand it until she had interactions. Yeah, and yeah, so I would like to hear what you think about it. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm also a young person. Evidently. I have a very similar question as Valencia's, which is about what we can do as young people. Because I think these talks, and I enjoy them and I come to them, and a lot of us, I'm sure, have greater awareness of the issues in Singapore that we don't see. But with this awareness, what can we do as people? Beyond just having conversations, but what can we actually do? And beyond volunteering and beyond like all the things that we already know that we can do, is there something that we can do that brings it to the public sector, to having more conversations with the government, for example?
Opposition politics.
What do we do as people?
Thank you very much. So, just to recap, there was a comment, observation about the importance of values, not just qualifications and pay. And then a question about how to continue the conversation. And finally, the question about what we can do. And it is?
I was going to suggest that you bring your friends and your parents to come and volunteer. But then she said, is there anything beyond volunteering? I think any individual's understanding of these issues is a journey. It's a journey, the more you see, the more you think about it, the more you talk about it, the more evolved and sophisticated your understanding of issues. I had to learn the hard way. I think the first time I met Yo Yen, I completely offended her by saying that, oh, we shouldn't give people financial assistance because it creates dependency. But of course, you can see now I'm very involved from that point. Yeah, so, and it starts with doing, right? So if you're a young person and you're someone on your radar who like completely doesn't care, maybe you can cajole them to volunteer somewhere with you and start that beginning in their journey. And I think it just takes people getting involved and knowing someone who are different from them and having that curiosity to ask about their lives. The other thing is also if you're a young person and you have friends in your cohort who has ambitions or professes ambitions to want to enter into civil or public service, please bring them to this kind of events. Those are the two tangible things I can think of for now. Thanks.
I think that there's already been a shift in the conversation. And firstly, I have to thank Yu Yen for actually really starting this, right? And it's the fact that you're here today. And I think we shouldn't underestimate what we as individuals, even just by speaking up. I have to say that parents are actually tough. Right, you know, my parents aren't here, although they were very interested. And my mother started to volunteer with Daughters of Tomorrow. And they actually really, my mom loves the work at Daughters of Tomorrow, you know, befriending and being able to help and then being exposed to a whole set of issues that she never thought about. But parents are more difficult. I think you should continue to speak and engage your friends about this. It's really useful to have the book. I've been just giving them away as presents, right? So I just keep buying the book and giving them away as presents. Of course, on a more sort of political level, you should be writing on your social media about this, should be weighing in, because part of our conversation is with the government is that they say people they don't want to pay more taxes, they don't want to subsidize other people. And so it is ultimately, and I'm glad we've come to this point, it is about values as people living here. What do we want? And are we prepared to be inconvenienced or to pay more for certain things or to pay more taxes? And, you know, it's up to us. At the end of the day, I think it really is up to us. So the more people you can speak to about this, and come join AWARE, come for more of these talks, we will continue to look into low-income issues. Care is actually really tough because we are playing within this game where money is what people count. So even though we didn't want to just focus on wages, but this was something about work, and so it looks like we are talking about how do we get people to have more money, etc. And we don't want that conversation to just be about money, but we are living in Singapore where money seems to be the main way that people are supported and measured. So we also have this difficulty, right? And we have to, I think we have to make the conversation bigger, but also be concrete in some things that we can do in the short and middle term, and in the longer term, look at how we can actually have wider, broader values.
I think in the last couple of months, most days I've been very hopeful, and I would like to point out actually though, that although at a lot of these events it is younger people who are coming up to me and saying that they've read the book, that this is the first piece of writing I've done where people are writing to me and telling me that their parents read the book. Yeah? Or I have people who are older writing to me and telling me their kids are reading the book. Yeah. So I don't think this is I don't think you should feel as if it's the concerns and the interests around the inequality and poverty issues are limited to a generation. I just don't think that that's true. That I think that actually across generations and across a pretty broad spectrum of people, judging from the people who have been writing to me and things like that, that there's a great deal of care and concern about these issues, and there's a great deal of commitment to wanting to do things differently. What people could do, how to think about how to do it differently, I think it's hard for me to really say things that are overly prescriptive, because I do think that people are coming at it from different places, right? And people have different experiences and expertise to bring to the table to add to the richness of the conversation. And I think that that really needs to carry on, and we have to be, I think we shouldn't rush to try to force consensus, and we shouldn't rush to close down the conversation, and we shouldn't rush to try to come to agreement. Yeah? Because the issues are important, because there are diverse views, we should welcome and we should treasure that we are able to build some space to have these conversations. I think just normalizing it and making it speakable and using new language to talk about things is very important. Yeah? That when we use new words to say things differently, that shapes the conversation, that frames the conversation differently. When we ask questions that are not typically asked, that disrupts how the dominant narrative moves, yeah? And those are important acts. I think many people are somehow connected to organizations in one way or another, maybe in your workplace, maybe in your neighborhoods, maybe as part of voluntary work or whatever. And within, if that's the case, if you are already rooted in organizations, that is a good place to start, to think about how inequality matters to the work that you do, because I would bet it does, right? No matter what your job is, right? And to begin sort of talking to co-workers, colleagues, friends, doesn't matter if you're not on the same page, right? To begin thinking about how within that space things could be done differently. What would that look like? Yeah, what kinds of strategies should you think about long-term and short-term? I think that could be a very good start. I know that some people are not in organizations or in jobs where that is a possibility or that feels like a possibility. And if that's not, then you have to go out and you have to find your community, because I think none of us should try to do this alone. You know, I think that there are already lots of people who are interested in these issues. This room already, some people, you know, make some friends if today, you know, if that's possible, right? But if it's not, go out and search for, I mean, I think this will take work, right? This will take effort. It's not something that will come to you. You have to go out and you have to search and build this community somehow. And I think that has to be a precondition to any kind of further action, you know, that you could partake as a group. And I think ultimately we have to do things together. I think that we are much stronger when we're collectives than when we're individuals.
Thank you. Also, one of the questions mentioned how we can also reach out to the public sector in these conversations. Just want to point out that public servants too are members of the public. They are at the same time individual citizens, and in fact there are many civil servants among us today. I recognize you. So and many of you will go on to, after you graduate, become civil servants. So as you have conversations with your friends, do not leave out the civil servants. They too, many of them want to be part of this conversation, they deserve to be. I know sometimes the space for conversation within civil service can feel a bit tight. So for example, sometimes when you tell your bosses that, this should be more generous or that should be expanded, they will say, but then people won't be willing to pay taxes, more taxes. I find it helpful in these situations to remind them that they also have individual decisions to make. So when they say people are not willing to pay more taxes, we can always ask them, but I'm willing. Who's not willing? Are you not willing? Why are you like that? So they are all individuals too. So with that, could you please join me in thanking our wonderful panel today?